So we're talking today about being healed, seeking the healing of God. We're in a series looking at how we might find God's healing in our lives and how we need to lay our burdens down, which we carry, and we tend to carry them very possessively sometimes. Sometimes we don't really think that there's anything anyone else can do for us. And we become practiced at kind of tending to our own weeds with our own remedies, only to look behind and see where all kinds of new weeds have grown up. And the Bible is filled with stories of how people of limited strength, just like you and me, and limited character sometimes, are put in situations where they are forced by circumstance to come to the acknowledgement that they cannot, just as the choir sang last week, they cannot carry the burden alone, that healing comes from God, and that we must lay our burden down and share our burdens, ones which we were never meant to carry by ourselves. And that can be a healing experience, a life-altering, a moment of turning where all kinds of new possibilities can become available to us. So we are to seek the path of healing. And there's a lot of things that have to happen for us to be healed. But we have to submit to the process. So there are all kinds of burdens and hurts that we're carrying and need healed from. One of the first is relationships. We're going to talk about more this next week, about how our relationships can be struggling with a burden and can have a barrier that needs to be removed or healed for the relationship to continue. Or at least to be in a relationship that is a positive one and not dysfunctional, abusive, or harmful. We have to lay our burdens down in our relationships, and that's one type of burden that we carry. Many of you are carrying unforgiveness, or bitterness, or resentment, or pain. And this often is regarding somebody who you're the closest with. The people closest to you can hurt you the most because you expect the most out of them, you've given them the most trust, you've given them the biggest part of yourself. And so when there is dysfunction or hurt there, it is the worst kind of hurt. Because is it a kind of hurt that comes from within? Because you have given them yourself. And all of us have different things going on in our relationships, and sometimes that can be a real burden that we carry. It's a struggle to forgive. It's a struggle to go on when you feel like the person that you knew and loved is no longer in your corner. That's a struggle. It's a burden to be treated dishonestly by someone that you've placed your trust in. And then have to go on wondering, how do you exist in this kind of relationship, knowing that the hurt is already there and been caused by intentional dishonesty and deceit, and the distrust is real. How can you give that to God? How can you keep walking with that person? It could be a coworker, it could be a student of yours, or it's a co-student. It could be a spouse, obviously. It could be a sibling. Something's happened, a rift has occurred, an argument. And sometimes it's a temporary thing, but other times this just builds and grows and the weeds keep coming. And so we're looking today at the burdens that we're carrying from the hurts that we're carrying. Another type of burden that you carry is you've lost a loved one. Somebody has died that was very important to you, and there's this giant gaping hole or wound that you're carrying, a burden that's so tough. And you get out of bed and you just wonder, how do you go on? How do you just take one foot in front of the other because of this loss. We have a tremendous grief share program that is about ready to start up again. It's a 13-week burden carrying program where you lay your burden before others and walk with others who are hurting in grief. And so that's another good thing about church, is that we help carry these burdens. It could be a child of yours, maybe making bad decisions or heading the wrong way. And you could be the best parent in the world, as if there is one. You can do all the right things, as if that ever happens. You could be a God-seeking parent who prays earnestly for the deliverance and protection and safety of your child, even if that child's 50 years old. And that son or daughter of yours, guess what? Just like we can do to God, they can turn away from your teaching, they can rebel against you, they can look you in the eye and say, I'm going to do what I want to do. Stop giving me advice. Leave me alone. Or they can just take off and not call and not show up. And sometimes our burden is carrying the relationships that have been cut off. And as much as you want reconciliation to happen, it just isn't happening. And you're left alone with your pain. That's another type of burden that you can carry. Because people are going to do what people are going to do. And sometimes you are helpless. I don't know if you've had moments like these lately. I'm sure you have at some point. There are times in life when you are standing alone, holding the bag, and everything you try, and this is particularly tough for those of us who like control, but everything you've tried is not working. And sometimes it's making it worse. And you're left looking down dejectedly, asking God, why haven't you taken this burden away from me? And God is looking at you from above, and you're not seeing it. And God is saying to you, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking at all your attempts. You're looking at all your resources. You're looking at all your failures. And you're not looking at me. You're not giving your burden to me. And so all these burdens that we tend to carry could be anything. Physical pain, illness, things that you pray for that just you don't understand. And I talked about grief. One of the biggest burdens people who grieve carry are people who have been stricken with illness. Why? Why do I have to carry this? Why do I have cancer? Why did that person die? They were your servant. Why this tragedy that makes no sense whatsoever? Why was this person cut down so young? Why would you let something happen like this? What kind of a God are you? And if you've been angry at God too, you know what this is like, this burden, this struggle of making peace with God. Sometimes our doubts, our disbelief in God is the burden that we carry. God's calling us, but we aren't ready to come to Him. And we're going to show Him who's boss. But it's killing us. The burden of disbelief or disenchantment, being cut off from God, can be tremendous. That wrestling match that we have with God. Because things didn't go our way. Because something doesn't make sense, because we're suffering and we don't know why. This can be a tremendous burden that we carry. Financial burdens. Most of you know about that. Some are well acquainted. Some of you, no matter what you've done, no matter what steps you've taken, no matter what you've done to increase your income, you're in a vice grip and you don't know how to get out. And it's getting worse. We're told to lay our burdens before God. On and on. The pains of life, the hurts. Where is the healing? It can be a choice that you're coming to. You are torn between two ways to go. Two choices, maybe two vocations. Maybe two people. You're torn between two people to listen to, to follow. Two people to love. Whatever it is. That living in two places at once can be an incredible struggle and a burden that we carry. You know, about 25 years ago, I was working full-time as a mental health provider, a counselor, at a public agency, and I had just completed my master's degree in counseling. My job security was good. And I had gone through some things personally, and I started to sense, hear the voice of God, that I was meant to do something else. That I was helping some people, but I was meant to do something else. And that's all I knew. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why I was being called away from something that didn't, this made no sense to me. I just got my master's. I was doing well. I liked the people I work with. I was generally secure. And I kept hearing this voice. You're just not doing what you're meant to be doing. And I was clueless. And I struggled with it. And I resisted it. And I tried to argue with eventually I felt like it was God calling me away, but I wasn't sure to where or what to do. And the only thing that I could come up with, I felt like God wanted me working more with the Bible, because I was reading a lot of the Bible those days, and reading all these books. And I felt like God wanted me to use that to change lives. And there I was, supposedly changing lives, but really not that much, and being called away. And I can tell you, for about a year, this struggle with God got really intense. And I started thinking in circular, back and forth ways. And I literally felt like I was losing my mind. Seriously. And there I was, a mental health counselor, probably more insane than the clients that I had. I definitely was more unhappy than with my clients. And I envied their simplicity of joyful living. I mean, they had problems, but, and they were there to talk about it. And I knew I was helping them, but I really felt like my life was more complicated, and I was more sad sack than any of them. And I hated the struggle. The struggle was, I just got so sick of the struggle. And so I replied to this blind ad. There's this church in Chillicothe. He didn't even say what church, didn't say what denomination, but we're looking for someone to work with the pastor, to do some visiting and some counseling and to help out and programming. And that's all it said. And by that point, I was a desperate lunatic. And so I sent a resume off. I said, God, you're driving me crazy. And if I feel like I'm supposed to work with the Bible, work with maybe a church, I don't know. And so I sent my resume. It turned out to be this place, okay? And here I am 20 years later, and looking back, that was all God. I have to tell you, if God can bring clarity and decisiveness out of that mental wreck that I was, God can bring healing to you too. And He led me here, and I know He did. I know for a fact He did. I can say that without a doubt. And sometimes we just need to yield our mess to God. And God will mend it and create some kind of a tapestry out of it. And that's what He did for me and my family. And God works in those kind of ways. So we carry these burdens, and we don't want to give them up because it's all we know. It's like addiction. Some people carry the burden of addiction and shame and self-recrimination and self-obsessiveness. Just being obsessed with preoccupied with your problems. You can carry this for years. You can mope around for years, wallowing in your choices, in your pain, in your indecisiveness. And God doesn't want you to live like that. He's trying to relieve your burden. But you got to place it before Him. And I want to talk about, we had the scripture passage on King Hezekiah. Here's a king whose father before him was a bad king. Most of the kings were bad. If you read the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, most of the kings ended up got corrupt by power. And they were greedy, and then their lives got off track. But King Hezekiah was a good king. And he followed God. He got rid of all the idols. And here was Assyria just coming down and attacking and taking over land and conquering cities, even conquering cities in Judah. Conquered a number of cities in Judah, God's people, God's land. Assyria was taking over. And Assyria, the king of Assyria, sent a message to Hezekiah and said, you are not going to be successful. And said to the people, don't listen to your king. He's trusting God. God cannot save you. We're too big for you. And King Hezekiah had already tried to plead with them and given them millions of dollars worth of gold and valuables, and got this letter from the king of Assyria that said, give up, we're too big for you, you're going to lose, and you're next. And King Hezekiah, you know what he did? He fasted, prayed, he tore his robes, put on sackcloth, and he took that letter and he laid it, he went to the temple, he laid it on the altar and prayed, God, you're the only one that can save us. And that's what we need to do. There are 3 steps. Number 1, humble yourself. Accept that you have a burden that you are carrying that you cannot carry any longer, or you cannot relieve or heal yourself. Number 2, place your burden in front of God, at God's feet. And number 3, be able to walk away trusting that God can relieve or help you carry your burden or heal you. It may not be the healing you exactly want, but God will answer your prayer, work with you, and help you carry your burden. Those are the 3 steps. Humble yourself, put it before God, trust that He can do it. We're going to have, at this point, we're going to have time for you to seek some healing. You can receive the communion elements. You can bring that slip of paper that says, my burdens I lay before the Lord, and just place them in this basket here. And if you'd like personal healing, or personal prayer, I should say, healing from God through prayer from myself and Steve administers, you can come down and we'll be over here and you can get some healing from us. We'll pray for you. We'll anoint you with oil if you like. Afterwards, after the service, you can go into the chapel and there'll be some Stephen ministers there to pray with you. Let's seek God's face. Let's seek healing at this time. I invite you to come.